Hail and well met, adventurers! Welcome to the Crate and Crowbar, a mysterious tavern that appeared as if from nowhere, from the swirling mountain mist, wherein a tale of gaming be wrought. A tale encanted to the speaking stones upon this night, the 10th of High Sun, 2023. The lizard man by the door tells you it's episode 424, whatever the fuck that means. Maybe he's drunk. I'm the walking dump stat, Marsh Davis, and joining me at the bar tonight with their steaming flagons of hot takes are the natural 20, Tom Sr.
Hello.
And the mega buff, Jamie Britton. Perfect. Gents, has anyone else been playing the video game Baldur's Gate 3? Because would you believe from that introduction that I have?
I have been playing it, yes.
I have not, and I'm dead keen to hear what you guys think about it. I've been surfing the discourse on this one until I actually pick it up properly and put some time into it. So I can't wait to hear what you guys think.
Well, I like it. Jamie, do you like it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of incredible, is my feeling on it. Would you like me to unpack why, or shall I just...
No, let's just leave it there. Let's just end the podcast now.
Let's just end the podcast.
I'll just retreat into my little private demon dimension that I've popped into just to...
So I guess, what classes did you guys create? Because it seems like the character creation stuff is really cool and flexible.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm playing as a lady. I've made the lady I tend to make for most games. So she is canonically not only, the savior / Antichrist of this world, but she's also Commander Shepard from Mass Effect. It's just the same person having landed on planet Baldur's. And I've chosen the sort of story background, which is called the Dark Urge, which I can talk about in a moment. But yeah, that's where I'm going from. What about you, Marsh?
Well, I feel like I made a slight error in that I just took one of the story background characters because they were so key, I think, to my enjoyment of Divinity: Original Sin 2, which I played a lot of. That I didn't want to miss out being like the focus of one of those stories. So I just picked your sort of your wizard himbo character, your Wimbo character, and he is actually more interesting than I thought he was going to be. But I wasn't from that kind of character select screen where you can either make your own character or you can pick one of the kind of the pre-mades. The pre-mades weren't initially that exciting to me, but as I've got into the game and I sort of experienced more of their backstories, I'm really into all of them now. But I feel like I could have created my own weirder character.
Well, it was weird because they when Divinity: Original Sin, the trick was to definitely pick one of the pre-generated characters your first time through the game. But it turns out with Baldur's Gate 3 that it's the opposite. They want you to... Sven, what's his name, head of Larian, has specifically said that he suggests you go for your own character first time through.
Well, he didn't say it to me, did he?
Well, he didn't say
it. That was my email.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
rude.
So yeah, I mean, just to talk about it more generally, Baldur's Gate 3, I never really played the original Baldur's Gate. I've tried a few times over the years, and even though they've been really adequately, held together and supported and updated and even added to by that team who I think are called Beamdog or something similar. You can now play Baldur's Gate on anything and it runs really well. And there's even an option to click where it's like, you don't have to deal with any of the fiddly D&D stuff. And every time I get to that screen where it says, do you not want to deal with any of the fiddly D&D stuff? I say, no, I am going to deal with that fiddly D&D stuff, and I am definitely going to play this game for more than 45 minutes before driving myself crazy trying to work out how it all fits together. So that's what always happened to me with Baldur's Gate. I know and respect many people who say it's a masterpiece, and I'm sure if I had gotten into it, I would have found that too. I once met a guy in a co-work space I was working in, and he saw me playing a video game on my laptop when I should have been working, and he came over and said, "Oh, you play video games?" And I'm like, yeah. We were sort of chatting. I was asking him what he played. And it transpired that he'd been playing video games all his life. But when Baldur's Gate came out, he just stopped because Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 were everything he'd ever wanted in a video game. And to this day, he just played mods and fan creations and expansions and the original base game. I found it amazing that this guy's entire gaming career had just basically been clarified in one kind of weirdo game.
That's amazing. Imagine that happening in any other medium. It's like, I've watched this one film, and films are just done for me now.
Yeah. I've got a mate who's like that with Independence Day. It was just like, yeah, I'm done with movies, Independence Day. So yeah, I always found that, and like I'm a latecomer to CRPGs generally. I think it was only listening to Crate and Crowbar and hearing you guys talk about it that sort of drew me into it. And I think Divinity Original Sin 2 was just an absolute mind-blowing experience for me. It solved so many of the problems I'd had with CRPGs before. I thought it was really well written, really well put together, beautiful, all that kind of immersive sim DNA running through it and everything like that. So I was super excited for Baldur's Gate 3, not so much because of the Baldur's Gatiness of it, but more because it's basically Divinity Original Sin 3. I mean, they could have called it Divinity Original Sin 3 : Baldur's Gate, and it would have been fine. No one would have noticed. It really is a Larian game, and it has all the things that I loved about Divinity Original Sin in there, and lots of stuff that they have kind of improved upon as well. Like things like, for example, if you're trying to do a persuasion check against someone and you happen to have a spell on you or a scroll on you that would help your dice roll in that, it will pop up at the bottom that you've got it, and you're able to apply it to use your spell, which is a thing you've been able to do in role-playing games for years now. Have a scroll to give yourself a status effect to improve your chances of something. But the fact that it supplies you with it at the moment that you need it and gives you a prod in that way, I've never seen done before. It's just transformative for a game that relies upon dice rolls of one level or another. The thing I think that is kind of majestic about it is, well, there's a bunch that's majestic about it. First of all, I would say it recreates everything that's great about Dungeons and Dragons and discards pretty much everything that's shit about Dungeons and Dragons. So it's got all the excellent monster slaying and having a big bag of comedy prop magic tricks that you can deploy at any moment in clever ways, and crazy cosmic nonsense going on all the time, and kind of a slightly horny take on Tolkien, very, very horny take on the sort of tropes of fantasy. I was very pleased with the character select options where you're given a chance to choose your character's genitals, and in what an unshowy and unflashy way that it did that. Like in Cyberpunk, it's like, do you want a pair of tits or do you want a pair of really rocking tits? And it was the opposite of that. It was just like, click, click, click. Yep, that'll do. Thank you very much. And I, for one, appreciated that as a deeply repressed British person. So yeah, all the good stuff about D&D kind of gets rid of all the bad stuff about D&D, which I think is all the kind of slightly grognardy mechanical stuff. It's all in there. It's just hidden under a sort of shimmer of UI and interface stuff, which I think is really, really great. And I like that because I just can't be bothered to work out the details, which is the bit about the original Baldur's Gate games that kind of did my head in. And I would say the other thing about it is that its storytelling structure, I think, is a complete marvel as well. And I think that's the thing that really elevates it above anything else I've really played in the entire RPG genre. I mean, I'm sort of part of the way through Act 2 now. I think I've played for about 30-ish hours. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff happening, lots of characters, lots of big shit happening. I will say that, I don't want to spoil anything about it, really. And it's an incredibly spoilerable game. Because there's, even if, I was thinking, maybe we should do a lock-in about Baldur's Gate, full spoilers lock-in. But actually, there are so many paths through the game and so many different ways that you can experience it, that it would actually, even if you'd played the game, a spoiler cast would sort of still spoil the game for you because there's so much in there you won't have experienced. So we probably won't do that. And there's so much stuff in there that I could the stuff that's happened to me in that game that I'm just aching to tell you about, that it's so hilarious and just so mind-blowing. There was one moment, I was playing through yesterday, which literally had me gasping. It was just pure, what the fuck? I can't believe they went there. Kind of magic, really, and just storytelling on a ICU sort of level, not intensive care unit, but like ICU the player.
Oh right, yeah,
yes,
okay.
yeah, not storytelling on an ICU unit. That is the TV show ER, which, as we all know, is a classic TV show. But this is not that podcast. Yeah, so structurally, I think is what makes it into something really special. I'm playing as the character who has the dark urge, which basically means that before you were your character, you were some kind of awful monstrosity, terrible person, which is a thing that, like, obviously has been a part of CRPGs kind of from the start. The idea that you're some sort of dark messiah of might and magic or otherwise. And I don't know if you're one of those, but you're certainly a very bad person because you have options to do really terrible, terrible shit. But what's great about it is because you have this sort of awful beast urge that lives inside you, which is separate, by the way, from the tadpole in your mind. You've got like two different wolves inside of you, and both of them are absolutely awful. Yeah, you have because you have this urge, it gives you, the player, an excuse to do terrible stuff just to see what will happen, because you can blame it on your dark urge and not on yourself. So it's a little bit of genius. I have done some terrible shit, like really awful, like despicable Akira shit, and it's just great because you can just, and all the other characters will respond to be like, oh my god, I can't believe you did that. You're like, blame the dark urge, you know.
I love that's kind of like the method actor excuse.
Yeah.
On our Discord, someone brilliantly said, oh, no one ever methods nice people, they always method cruel bastards, and are just allowed to be mean to everyone around them in the name of their art.
And it absolutely gives you that. And I have like, what's been great about it is, as the game's gone on, I've leaned more and more into the dark urge because it's so delicious. And now I'm just horrible to everyone I meet, always. And there are so many like particular dialogue options that you can go for to just be a real fucking arsehole to everyone, no matter how vulnerable they're feeling or whatever's going on. So that's fantastic. And it's a whole bunch of stuff that you won't see if you don't play the dark urge, but I'm sure there is a equivalent amount of crazy stuff if you do. One of the things that Crate and Crowbar has contributed to popular culture in the most fundamental way is the idea of Big Town, which I think was you, Tom, back in the day, talking about arriving at a big town in an RPG and being overcome with sort of decision overload because there's so much going on, and then just basically not playing the game ever again, right? Which is a real problem and has been discussed back and forth on this podcast for years. Baldur's Gate 3, I think, solves the big town conundrum through its use of storytelling structure. And the way it does this, and this is a very mild spoiler, but it's been in all the previews, so I think it's okay, is that Act 3 of the game is the city of Baldur's Gate. And Acts 1 and 2 are on your way to Baldur's Gate, basically. And there's lots of characters very early on who kind of say to you, well, when we get to Baldur's Gate, we'll do this. And when we'll get to Baldur's Gate, we'll do that. So the big town, the biggest town, really, is right at the end of the game. And the areas that you're in the first two acts of the game they're big, but they're not unfocused. And everything in the story, all the sort of side quests and side characters and plot lines that you encounter, and they are myriad and many and very complicated, they all point in the same direction. And that is its masterstroke, I think. And I think it's key to how well it all hangs together. And it remains to be seen. As I say, I'm probably less than halfway through the game, to be honest. It remains to be seen how it plays out. But if the reviews and all the stuff people have been saying about it is true, I think they've nailed it, in that by very judiciously limiting their scope, but knowing exactly where to sort of amp things up and bulk things out, but knowing when to be lean as well, they avoid the big town problem, because the end of Act 1 isn't you arrive in big town, as it is in lots of games. They actually push that further down the road. And instead, you have all of this building characters and building plot and building mechanics, which I assume all pay off in that final act, in the Baldur's Gate, biome, as it were. And I think it's such a clever move because it allows them to be really, really creative, really, really sort of mad with all of their ideas, because they manage, like I say, they manage to point them all in the right direction. They manage to, every side quest you do, every character you meet is part of the same big picture story that's going on. It's not going round up my chickens. It's not, find my. It's not the sort of Diablo 4 style quest where it's just like, my husband's gone off into the woods with a witch. Can you come and get him back, please, and kill any demons you meet on the way? I mean, there are missions like that, but they very much they loop round and they feed back in and they take you back to places you hadn't been before. So yeah, that's my kind of feeling about it, really. It's written really well. It's really funny. As you said, Marsh, like the characters sort of zag away from where you assume they're going to be. It reminds me of the Witcher games in that respect. Like they pivot away from obviousness pretty intensely and consistently. Every time you think you know what you're getting, they'll take you off in a different direction. That's my feeling about it. I'm enjoying it immensely. I can't stop playing it. I can't stop thinking about it. It's bloody brilliant.
My character has a cat with wings. That's all
Fantastic.
I really needed. But yeah, I totally. I'm not nearly as far in the game as you are. I think I'm getting towards the later stages of Act 1. But already I can feel like that same sort of gravitation that you're talking about, where even side quests are sort of shuffling you along through different paths towards a similar sort of goal. And it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter. It matters to you as a player which one of those paths you take, because they're each extremely gratifying and an excellent way of expressing your character. But there is still they're still kind of elegantly shaped to kind of not so much to funnel you back to the same point, but just in the same kind of pushing you towards the same geography. And it's not something you overtly notice, I think, which is the elegance of it. Whereas in a lot of games where you have branching choice structures, you can see the points at which those choices tie back into the main trunk, and it's hard to perceive that really in Baldur's Gate. I'm not sure there is exactly a main trunk so much as like a landscape that you're journeying through, and you end up in the same sort of places, but you're not necessarily doing the exact same things there. I think that's great, and also the writing is just really joyful. Like I think it goes back to one of the things I was saying about Viewfinder the other day, where you feel that sometimes writing has been inserted into the game because perhaps there was an empty box on a spreadsheet and they didn't have any writing to close off the end of a particular level, so somebody had to come up with something to put in there. And it's not necessarily bad writing, but it doesn't necessarily make a case for its own existence. Whereas all of the writing in Baldur's Gate feels like it needed to be there, like it deserved to exist. And it followed on naturally from something else that somebody really wanted to write. There's just a kind of sense of enthusiasm to all of it, which I don't always get from a lot of writing in video games.
I agree, and it's got a kind of the tone of it almost reminds me of Everything Everywhere All at Once in a funny kind of way. It's got a similar sort of jolly, silly, faintly like fecal sort of yeah. It's kind of the kind of Larian's obsession with talking animals continues here to like completely joyous effect. You can talk to basically any animal in the game, and it's always really funny. There's some majestic posh cats you can meet later down the line.
You just get it's very true to role playing, because you get the sense whenever you're about to pick an option, you can almost see the sort of GM stapling their fingers with anticipation of what you're going to pick, and then you pick something like, oh yes, I'm so glad you picked that, because now I get to pour this bullshit on you. I've been preparing for hours. And there's just this sense of joy to it, which I wasn't really anticipating, even having played and loved Larian's previous games.
It's really nice to see something that adapts tabletop role-playing games by really leaning into just filling the game with narrative and writing at every opportunity. Often that hasn't necessarily been, the way of it's often a way of communicating the idea of like character choice and branching narratives and things like that. But actually, I think Disco Elysium sort of kicked open the doors for this one. But I think this does a kind of comparably good job of using good writing as a way of, building your immersive sim, essentially, and giving players feedback on what they do. And like I saw an article to this effect earlier, so I won't sort of labor someone else's point, but like the fact that the big town problem is partially eradicated because you kind of know that whatever you do, you're going to see some awesome shit, and whatever the dice lands you in, you can trust in that. I mean, I talk to people who are playing this game who have several characters in the party who I do not have. I mean, there's a couple of those who I know exactly why I don't have them for Dark Urge related reasons. But like that is huge amounts of stuff that I'm not going to see on my playthrough. And for the first time ever playing a game, that feels absolutely fine. I feel comfortable that my experience will be different than someone else's. And it is through writing and narrative. That is their their tool for that. And I think that is just a super exciting and unique kind of machine to be a part of.
I would say I'm not sure I totally agree with you yet about how it uses D&D's rule set. Like, I haven't actually played 5th edition D&D, but I feel like perhaps specifically the way that rule set is expressed through the combat of a video game isn't maybe what I want. And I think there's like there's just going to be an innate collision between the sort of breadth of simulatory choices that are available in dialogue-based tabletop role-playing games and the sorts of things that I desire from a tactics game. Like, I would definitely prefer fewer abilities and have their different tactical applications be clearer and more pronounced. I prefer the synergies to be more easily readable. And I don't think that's really a criticism of Larian, who are obligated to use the D&D system and make the best game out of it that they can. And I think they probably have. It's an insane achievement for them to have accounted for the level of freedom that they have. But it's also just the case that I don't think I enjoy that amorphousness in the context specifically of a turn-based tactics game, specifically a single-player turn-based tactics game, which is how I'm playing this. Obviously, you can co-op this game, but I'm not doing that. So that means I carry this enormous burden for every single of my party characters who can each express themselves in incredibly intricate, complicated, open-ended ways. And there's no GM there to kind of hedge things and make sure that the challenge that I'm facing is gratifying. So I don't think it's like I'm not like upending my table in anger at this. This is just I just feel like maybe this isn't exactly what I particularly want from a turn-based tactics game. And I think there's a bit of fussiness around particularly things like upkeep or downtime, as it's sometimes called in tabletop role-playing games, that I don't particularly enjoy when transposed into video games. And I think part of that is just to do with like streamlining, and the game does a lot of streamlining, especially when it comes to like the number crunching of individual dice rolls. That's incredibly fluid, but it can't necessarily find a way to make the effects of things easily readable in advance. I think that's just, there's a lot of data and they can only present so much of it, and that's just a hard problem for them to face. And it also doesn't deal with time passing in the same way. And so there's like there's a lot of necessity, particularly appears in the 5th edition of D&D, for you to recharge your powers and recharge spell slots and things like this by resting. And all of that stuff makes a lot more sense in a conversational game where the flow of time is controlled ad hoc. And I don't necessarily feel that comfortable with it in a game where the world state is essentially static and advanced at intervals. I don't like having to remember to rest. Maybe just particular to me, but I find that just quite annoying. Like there's an interesting strategic element to it where you're considering how much power you're going to have when you enter the next fight. And obviously, you know that by resting and recharging those powers, you might that might cost you some other opportunity that might pass by in that time. But I think that the interest that offers is totally outweighed by the need to cut down on fuss, and the fact is that it's just really, really fucking annoying when you forget and you enter a battle and you're like, oh, I literally can't do anything, I guess. And you can't just say, oh, GM, by the way, sorry, I meant to say we could have rested. They can't retcon that in any way. So you just have to reload, and it's just because you didn't click a button in the UI, and that seems frustrating to me. But does any of that chime with you, or do you not agree at all?
No. I'm finding the combats. I mean, I sort of agree with you entirely on the kind of the amount of clutter that's going on. You know, you open up your sort of character's ability wheel, and it's just like, okay, let's see what we got here. You know, you've got a billion spells that you can do and a billion different actions. Like, I've got 2 barbarian characters on my team, in my party, as they say in the business, and like I've got like 2 barbarians, and they can both do various things of like fury like things where it gives them extra turns. I have to admit, I never know how many more turns I'm going to have. It seems to be a number between 1 and 3 at any given moment, so I don't really understand how that's working. I think the economy of it, I've been kind of enjoying the kind of the push and pull of it mostly. I think, like, I like the fact that I can't just, because I enjoy the camp sections where you go for your long rest, which always feels like sort of weirdly parochial, like, oh, am I going to have a rest or I'm going to have a long rest? Or, you know, it's that kind of strangely weird feel to that stuff. But you know, the camp scene stuff I quite like. Yeah, I don't mind the economy of it so much. It's very you get so much stuff. There's constant stuff. You're just looting immense amounts of like magical artifacts and like glowing balls full of spirits and shit, and you're just like, right, put it in the sack, we'll sort through it later.
I'm eating all of those.
Oh yes, you've got that character.
Yeah, so it's amazing how you can cut down on your inventory when you can literally consume magic swords.
No, I don't mind it so much. I think the save system, I think they've probably done their best with it, but like, it's another sort of spell you have to, your ability to travel in time sort of has to be managed in the save system. And pretty much everyone I've spoken to and in the Discord, I've had stuff where they kind of limp their way to the end of a boss fight and then fail the skill check and not being able to reload, you know, because for ages, because they haven't quick save adequately, you know.
I mean, I don't know if you find this, but I would say that they're when you go to the load game menu and you select a save, the delete save game button is exactly where I instinctively assume the load this save game button would be. Yeah. So I have accidentally deleted the exact save that I wanted to load at some point.
Yeah, and also I play on the Steam Deck, which has the control pad layout, and quick save is R2X, and quick load is R2Y. And obviously, if you press the wrong one, that's a disaster, isn't it? That's just a disaster, and that has caught me out so many times now.
Guess I'm sticking with that Dark Urge option.
There's none of those I don't mind. The Dark Urge options are all fine. It's more the you know, like, oh, I just stumbled into this unwinnable fight, and you know, I just need to not be here anymore.
I would say I find the game almost distressingly horny. I don't know. I don't know what the underlying principles are for the character creator tool, which is presumably what they've used to create all the beautiful NPCs too. But there is something like faintly disturbing about the way it just reliably spits out creatures who are like physiologically optimized for slash fiction. They have like just perfected the maths of creating lizard men thirst traps, and I've yet to find any being in the game, human or not, that is not in some way like erotically stirring.
Yeah,
it's like getting to the point where it's actually like emotionally difficult for me as a player, because I'll go into a conversation with just some like a street vendor and be like,
Yeah.
"Oh God, no, not another extremely fuckable gnome! Like, how am I going to explain this to my vampire boyfriend?" And then I already have to explain my vampire boyfriend to my slightly bigoted elf girlfriend,
Yeah.
who I will fix, by the way, given enough time. And then I don't know how I'm going to explain any of this to my actual real world partner, should they, God forbid,
Oh
actually see
God,
me
no!
play this.
Jesus Christ, God in heaven! The worst case scenario. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I wonder a little bit about, part of the, modern like hyper appeal of D&D has been down to this a Critical Role, this YouTube show, which I find unbelievably unwatchable. Right, I find it just the most irritating thing. But I know loads of people really, really love it and really, really get into it. So respect to them. But all of those guys are all like insanely hot actors and actresses, and I wonder if that is a kind of vibe that's kind of bled into the sort of sexiness of the game a little bit. Like, I don't know, maybe that's a flat take, but I wondered if that had maybe inspired them a little bit to make it horny, because they're always leaning into that aspect on that show.
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of permissiveness, I think, to the way it's been written. I think that's partly to avoid situations where the player can coerce naughtiness from people in a way which would be transgressive and fairly grim. And so, in order to account for that, they've just made everybody be really up for it.
I mean, I don't know.
all the time.
I think it's pretty true to life. I mean, I remember when I was in my early 20s and I held a party, and every single person I knew propositioned me, and I got to pick which one I wanted to shag that night, and it was just as simple as that. So I don't think it's too. I don't think it's pushing the boundaries of fiction too much, because obviously that's happened to all of us many times.
Yeah, I forgot I was speaking to the writer of Skins there. I mean,
yeah, I'll let you choose which character in Skins was based on me. Hint: it wasn't Nicholas Hoult.
I was gonna ask you covered actually the combat, but I was gonna ask about in terms of how much it is sort of embraces the D&D-ness of it, the sort of those really crunchy dice roll mechanics, and how much it sort of glosses over it. But I was kind of curious about how much time you're spending doing lots of fighting, or doing lots of exploring, or doing lots of chatting to people. Like, I mentioned this because I'm just coming towards the end of Final Fantasy 16, where for me the combat has become completely tedious and is actually most of the game. So I was wondering, like, how much do you have to really get into the combat to enjoy it, or is there? Can you just sort of like go through the conversation?
I've been enjoying the combat actually. I'm usually a kind of more story guy, and my finger hovered over the idiot version story mode of the gameplay. But actually, I'm glad I clicked normal mode or whatever, because I do find the combat fun. It feels challenging enough, and it felt like there was a hump to get over in the early game, and then I was cruising for a while, and now in Act 2, like, everything's kicking my ass again, so I have to kind of think about it just enough. I mean, it feels really well balanced, and also it's legible enough for you to kind of... I found myself just sort of lucking my way into kind of slightly dodgy but still quite fun synergies. So, like, my main character has a sword that turns her invisible when she kills people, and also a cloak that charms people when they hit her. So you end up with this kind of weird thing where half of the enemies on the battlefield are charmed, and I'm invisible running around, and they're all looking for me. And then I've got another spell that kind of does damage to charm people and stuff like that. So it's kind of it doesn't look particularly legible when you kind of open up the inventory screen and see that you have literally 3,000 different magic swords. But actually, the way that they've set up your characters, where you can just sort of try things on and see how they work, is pretty good. So yeah, for someone like me who kind of finds like pre Final Fantasy 16 Final Fantasy games pretty like alarming and frightening whenever you're looking in the loadout menu, I actually find it kind of weirdly soothing because it doesn't seem to make that much difference.
I find it quite different. I found it to be quite chaotic and unpredictable. So I mean, like, fairly early on, I was having fights on the default difficulty setting where the first thing that happened to me was I was one-shotted by a walking brain, and that was it. I'm just dead instantaneously. Like the second combat I had, a wizard just put my entire party to sleep, and then they all died before they could act. And that stuff does seem to happen quite a lot. I don't really. There's no real way of knowing when you enter a combat what your enemies are going to do, and I'm always surprised. And I don't necessarily think that's good. I think that lack of readability is sometimes frustrating. Sometimes it can be exhilarating, but most of the time it just means I'm reloading. And there's, even on the easy difficult setting, combat takes a lot of time, and I think it is. You have to really I think you have to enjoy it in order to play the game, because it does unavoidably take up quite a lot of time. I'm surprised there isn't an even easier difficulty setting so you can essentially blast through combat, because it's still a challenge. Like even on the easiest difficulty setting, my characters will be one of my characters will be taken out pretty quickly in combat, and I'll have to adapt in some way. I mean, I am winning the fights, but there's a lot of healing afterwards and time spent getting people back up to kind of their normal level of hit points, which just seems like rigmarole, really, because just if I've selected the option which is let me win, then I want let me win. I don't want let me win and then spend 15 minutes dealing with damage mitigation.
Larian, they're super good for mod support. I think it might even already have it, so it's like one nice thing is that there'll be lots of ways further down the line to kind of customize the game, and maybe like add a fast forward button into the fights where there's like 20 little gribbly Trevors running around, and you have to watch them all scurry about and fire one arrow shots off. It's can be quite tedious to watch.
I would like I think RPS mentioned this actually, but a mod I'm desperate for is one where you can switch characters when you enter conversation, because currently if you hit a conversation trigger, you're irrevocably stuck in a conversation between whichever character you were controlling at that second. But that does mean, like, if you're moving as a group and you've just you've finessed the movement of your dingus character, whoever they are, and then suddenly they hit a conversation trigger, you're like, oh no, fucking dingus is going to have to carry this diplomatic operation to conclusion, and then that goes disastrously wrong. Because obviously, in a role-playing game, somebody else would just pipe up and say, "Shut up, dingus."
I'm gonna dingus. No one told you to talk. One other thing I would say, last thing I'll say about it, I think, is that because I guess just because of the nature of like the Forgotten Realm setting, like there are a whole bunch of cosmic entities jostling for your attention in this game. I don't know if that's been your experience, Marsh, but like I have at least 3, maybe even 4 various horned beasts coming to me in my dreams and asking me to do stuff for them.
At least several of the characters are haunted.
It's almost like this sort of weird Q&A section where everyone's clamoring to ask you questions, and you're like, oh, okay, first you, and then you. We'll get to you all, Yeah. So I'm quite enjoying that, but it is a tad confusing. I think one of them might be Jason Isaacs. I'm not sure.
It's good. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about it when you get to play it, Tom.
Yeah, I really can't wait. I'm finding all the discussion around it really interesting. It just makes me more excited about it.
Well, it's a proper PC game, right? It's like a proper CRPG on a massive scale that has completely exploded the Steam charts and sold an absolute bucket load, and that's just super exciting, I think.
Yeah, and also just I've been steering away from like reviews and ongoing. Like I've been obviously sort of skimming a lot of the takes and things, but the joy for me, like in games like this, is the discussion around them. Like as soon as I start encountering things, I want to go and find that discussion and see what people are talking about, what they're finding in the game and stuff. So it's it's an event game.
Do you know what kind of character you're going to play when you boot it up?
I don't know. Like I'm mostly like, so with Divinity Original Sin 2, I picked the Red King, I think his name was. So I picked one of the sort of
Red Prince,
main. Yeah, Red Prince, that's him. So I picked one of the main characters who they do have their own sort of discrete stories that are woven through the game, and that was awesome. But it's really good to know that it's good to create like a new character for this one and sort of follow your dark urges to wherever they may lead.
I was wondering actually if you would play your goblin character from the CNC Plays D&D campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is a large goblin camp in the opening act of the game, and I had the word goblobbery running through my head several times, which you coined during that campaign.
Yeah, so
I wish to report a goblobbery.
I was a deep gnome who is an incredibly dense, rocky figure who's like heavier than a black hole, and could do like magic by clapping and stuff. And then
they're in there. You can be one.
I'll definitely make a deep gnome. I love deep gnomes. Like after that D&D campaign, CNC D&D, I came up with like entire ideas for how they draw maps and make music as deep gnomes in the depths, because they don't want to alert the goblins around them, but their pickaxes make sounds as they quietly mine away. Like this tinkling music that they make. It sounds like a waterfall.
Oh.
Deep gnome. If there's a deep gnome in there, instant character creation, right there. And then it's a matter of class actually, because I've played just a few D&D games over the table, and a class like really affects how much I get to do as an individual. But I guess like in the video game, of course, you're commanding all the characters unless you're in co-op, so maybe it matters a bit less. I don't know. I'll probably do some kind of slightly nerdy reading into what the classes can do and the abilities and stuff like that, because I do tend to like that in D&D.
Do you find it as easy to kind of earnestly role play in a video game as you do at the tabletop?
It's really difficult, because I think role playing over the tabletop is a much more like weirdly intense experience, and I tend to sort of all the campaigns I've played over the tabletop been played. Often they've just gone to humor, like pretty much almost straight away. So it's been like about trading jokes while sort of trying to stay in character. And there's not that kind of rapport, obviously, in video games naturally. I think like over the tabletop, when it comes to role playing, there's always the sense that you're having to work with the people around you to make it fun for everyone. So that social element to it gates what I would do with my character in any given moment, to not like take the piss or just break the encounter or just do something incredibly too disruptive that would just break the collective experience. I think everyone over the tabletop has a sort of collective sense of responsibility towards the experience that everyone's having. I think that's a really powerful dynamic in actual over the tabletop, not just D&D, but any sort of RPG role playing game. And of course, that is just not available. It's not present or part of the interactive video game experience at all. There's no sense of responsibility to the story or the narrative or to any of the characters around you, really, in the way that if you're actually, having riffing with people around you. So I tend to sort of, it becomes on some level in video games more of a slightly academic exercise. It's like, how far can I push this? What if I did this? Like, what has someone written for me as a fun thing in response to this ridiculous piece of behavior? And it's less about that back and forth. And games will never capture that. It's just they just can't at the moment.
And it's interesting because I think when I'm at the table, I always play characters who are quite dissimilar from me. I'm quite happy to be deeply amoral, like a little goblin with strangling hands who likes to strangle people. Totally happy. I'm totally on board with that. But then, for some reason, whenever I sit down in front of a video game RPG, I always sort of default to the goody two-shoes options, the things that seem most rational, the things that are best for the group, even when that group is made up of people who should, by rights, have quite different opinions and sometimes voice them. The characters in this, sometimes I'll do something that annoys my vampire boyfriend. But then if I get a chance to be the vampire boyfriend in a conversation, I will immediately choose the option that sounds most like the sort of the rational goody two-shoes voice. I don't know why I do this. I don't know why.
That's really interesting. No, that's totally the opposite of what you do. That's really interesting.
It's quite funny, isn't it? Because like a generation ago, or not a generation ago, a couple of video game generations ago, there was the Call of Duty level where it put machine guns in your hand and asked you to go through an airport and kill people.
Oh yeah.
And now it's like, go for dinner with this count and insult the decor. It's like, you're like, I simply couldn't be so vulgar in front of the count.
I think there's also an element of in games, your character is going to speak for you in a way that you don't like. there's such a gap sometimes between what you hope your character would say or what you would say in a given situation and the available dialogue options, just necessarily. Of course, the classic example of that, this is LA Noire with their classic, whether the prompts were something like trust, doubt, and when you're a detective and you're interviewing people, and doubt as the word, as a way to interrogate someone, would end up in just wildly different approaches from your character, where like you press doubt when you're interviewing this poor old lady, and then your character will just start yelling at her, like, "What are you hiding? What do you know?" It's like, what? I was just wanted to gently doubt what she said. So there's always that distance between you and what your character ends up actually saying, like verbatim. And that just puts me at such a remove when I'm actually doing RPG scenarios in video games in a way that just actually, saying lines of dialogue in the moment over the tabletop is just like a totally different experience. That it's more, that choose your own adventure book. It's like, do you want to go over the cliff, or fight the dragon? It's like, okay, I'll just turn to the go over the cliff page just because I want to see what they wrote. So it's almost that I'm not engaging directly with being in personal role playing necessarily. I'm just kind of almost not academically, but just kind of curious about the paths that are laid out in front of me, and I want to sort of see them and reverse them and then sort of explore other ones. I don't know,
cliff
like, how about
curious.
I'm very cliff curious.
Invented a new sexuality. So here in Baldur's Gate.
The old cliff
Can't
urge.
fuck the cliffs yet.
No,
soon.
it's only a matter of time. How about you, Jamie? Like, have you played many like tabletop RPGs and stuff?
Yeah, like quite a few. I've run a few as a DM and played in quite a few as well. I love it.
Awesome.
I'm very annoying as a player because for example, I was playing in a game based on the Alien system, and not the Alien system, the Alien movies. And I decided to be a mad scientist character who worshipped the aliens as gods. And all that meant was just I was constantly just running towards the aliens and sort of prostrating myself in front of them and asking them to sort of elevate me to a new level of humanity.
Was it a short game?
Yeah, well, it was a short game because the aliens just tore me to pieces in session 1. I mean, it was a great session 1, but like I always want my players to play like that, and I've had some great times actually recently with Marsh's RPG Teeth, because it really encourages that. And I was playing with a bunch of people on the CNC Discord, and we had a great time, because like I was really urging them to get into that frame of mind where just fuck with me, just annoy me, like try and piss me off in the stupid shit you try and do, because that's kind of, in my head, that's the kind of game element really as a GM, is to kind of like how can I sort of support this crazy choice, like how can I try and find a way to allow them to do this, to sort of yes and their decisions, which is obviously something a video game can never quite, manage. But I think Baldur's Gate does gesture in the right direction, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you guys touched on that D&D in its current moment is so different than it was like 5-10 years ago, in the sense that so many podcasts have kind of come up, like really super massive podcasts, like The Adventure Zone and Dungeons and Daddies and things like that.
I fucking love Dungeons and Daddies.
It's so funny. They're all absolutely so funny.
Rude Tales of Magic is another recommend for people who like that stuff. Yeah.
We should put a list of the our faves. Like I'm pretty sure like most of our listeners will know them, but that combination of like humor and horniness has kind of really come to the fore thanks to all of those kind of podcasts. And the way D&D is seen now is, I think, much more fun. Even like stuff like Stranger Things has kind of brought it to the fore in a sort of different light, and not a sort of satanic in the 80s, a satanic pastime that kids play in their basements while their parents are away or something.
No, I've run role-playing games for my parents-in-law, who are like an elderly Jewish couple. I had to explain to them several times what role-playing was, and by the end of it, we were playing the Monty Cook system called, what's it called?
Numenera?
No, it wasn't Numenera. It's one of their other ones. It's got dinosaurs in it. It's set in like dinosaur land, and you play as yourself, but you also play as a dinosaur familiar who runs around with you. So I had my parents-in-law playing along with that, and I got to see some sides of my father-in-law, of Martin, that I'd never seen before. He was like talking about abducting one of the guards of the base we were going to break into and taping up his entire head with masking tape. And I just, that was just a wonderful moment. He's never said boo to a goose, and he had all these like violent fantasies about what he was going how he was going to contain this innocent security guard. Anyway, I digress.
Do you want us to bleep the name of your relative in the final version of this, Jamie?
That's fine. It's Martin. He's all right.
Nice.
That's just the beast that lives inside him. It's not him.
They just sound like Baldur's Gate 3 just embrace the joy of those kind of slightly chaotic interactions in some ways through its writing and responses and stuff. I'm really interested to play it, particularly as a sort of reflection against. God, the game name has gone completely out of my head because I'm old.
Pac-Man.
Oh, no, we mentioned it earlier. Shamblesman game where you go around.
Disco Elysium.
Yes.
They should have called it Shamblesman. The game. Oh man, that's such a better title.
That is genuinely a better title.
That's how I think of it. You just play an utter shambles man, just shamblesing it up over some dark corner of Eastern Europe.
Shambleman's terrible holiday to space Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, I feel like the Carry On films. Shambles Man in Europe, Shambles Man in America.
I would absolutely watch Shambles Man in America.
But in terms of like the sheer amount of dialogue and the sort of exposition, expression of character through writing alone, Disco Elysium seems like a kind of high point for me, and so it's great to see. It sound from what you guys were saying, like this sounds like another game in a very different tone and very different sort of setting, really sort of centering good writing and entertaining dialogue and surprising twists and turns during conversations. That sounds awesome.
It is, I think, so far.
We'll definitely talk about it more.
Report back, yeah.
Yeah.
What are you even playing, Tom?
I've been playing a couple of games completely different. So I've been playing a couple of Platinum games. The first one is The Wonderful 101, which I think was released in like 2012, 2013 on the Wii U. And I never had a Wii U. It always seemed like a sort of an absolute mess of an idea, but there's some really cool games on it. This one has been remastered relatively recently for the Switch. I think it's on PC as well. And you play, it's a sort of superhero game where you get to round up loads of civilians. And in a sort of like, from a sort of elevated perspective, it's almost like a tilt shift perspective. You play this tiny, tiny little guy surrounded by like a swarm of civilians who have been empowered by your superhero magic. And by drawing gestures with the right stick or using the touch screen, you can turn them into weapons that you then swing at enemies. And different weapons, obviously, different characteristics in terms of like there are enemies that are weak to the whip. You pull armor off them and then turn all of your minions into a sword and then slash them. And then if they charge you, you can press the left trigger and all of your minions turn into a blob of jelly. And in a very pleasing way, the charging enemy bounces off you and then thrashes around upside down like a dying tortoise as you smack them with your weird sword power. And it's the director was Kamiya from like Devil May Cry fame, and the director of I think Beautiful Joe, which is a game.
That was it. Oh, my head was about to explode. I was trying to remember what was this game the spiritual successor to, but that turns out to be something you can't really easily Google an answer to. Beautiful Joe. Yeah, I played that. I haven't played Wonderful 101, but it looks very similar.
So the main character in it, it's actually the main character is it is Beautiful Joe, like in terms of the design on the mask and everything, and the red clothes and stuff. But this is more like from an RTS perspective, and actually in practice, it's just a very, very unusual game that, with an unusual gesture-based control system that channels Platinum's. Platinum famous for just huge combo systems, very sharp third-person action games. Again, like Bayonetta is probably their most famous game. And so if you know Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, indeed, like those games where you're just comboing, doing like clutch dodges to slow time down and then deliver abilities, lots of weapons that you equip and then master the combo system over a period of about 10 acts or something. But actually, Platinum have done a couple of weird games like this one, like the Wonderful 101. You play it and it has all of the DNA of those other Platinum games as fighting games, but just like portrayed in a very like quite funny, like vivacious, colourful way. It's got these mock superheroes who just have who are all quite funny, and then it sort of, but it is still that Twitch combat game, but it sort of tricks you into thinking it's not, which I find really interesting because it's kind of, I think it's an effort to bring those like very like famously those games that are famous for being very difficult and alienating for their difficulty and their demanding control schemes and Twitch ability, and presenting it in a way that like you'd give to your kid to play, and frankly they would master it before you. They would find out how to actually craft all these citizens, this grouping around you, all these little Pikmin into those swords and into those kind of whips in a split second. And I've watched YouTube videos where there are players who've unlocked like combos and like cancel combos, where so canceling in combo creation in video games is where you've got a special move and it takes a certain number of frames to play out, and then that means you're vulnerable like for that amount of time. But if you, or it means that you can't chain that attack into other attacks. Canceling means that you get to cancel the attack a few frames early and then immediately start another attack. So you could form your own combos by cancelling in and out of different special moves to create like ever increasing, like ridiculous stacking combos that earn you thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of points. So you could play through Wonderful 101 and enjoy it just a kind of like really fun knockabout in this lovely, colourful tilt shift superhero world. But then it's worth watching the YouTube videos of these players who are just able to just juggle an entire battlefield of enemies by just cancelling in and out of different abilities, uppercutting with a particular sword attack, and then turning into a whip, and then activating that attack, and then they just go higher and higher into the air, and there's like hundreds of enemies around them, just like rising with them, just getting hit thousands and thousands of times, and the score combo just goes up and up and up. And in true platinum fashion, at the end of each sort of little section, a little combat segment, it grades you. It gives you a little trophy at the end of each bit. It's like, oh, this was bronze. And I was just getting regularly bronze until I watched these videos. And then I was like, oh, there's a whole level to this that I just did not understand was there. And yeah, so sorry, that's quite a technical explanation of like cancelling and stuff like that. But it's really the heart of lots of combat systems. It's sort of gesture based, so you're often using your right stick to draw your little men into a sword, and then draw your little men into a whip, or draw your little men into a circle to plant a bomb. So it's all very kind of gesture based. But if you have enemies in the air in a certain state, then you can quickly draw a bomb and then quickly draw a whip and then activate those attacks. It's quite hard to explain, but it's kind of, it's the way they baked all this complexity into something that is quite on ostensibly quite a casual game, just aimed at children, and it's sort of almost teaching people the sort of deeper complexities of Platinum's combat systems that are actually transferable skills to the rest of their games.
Oh wow!
Which is kind of wild. And so it's almost like if I was like 11, I'd play Wonderful 101, and then I'd try and get really good at it, and I'd learn how to do all that sort of technical stuff. And I'd these days with YouTube and just like on Discord or whatever, people are going to be like trading strategies. They didn't have to build it this way. They didn't have to make it this good. They really, really didn't. They could have made it just like the Lego games. They could have made it just, oh, you get to draw cool shapes and then press the button to whack robot enemies and they blow up and they look pretty. They didn't have to do all this technical shit. Like on top of that, they didn't have to like create all this depth of all these combo systems and this reward system that gives you medals and different trophies for getting better and better at the game. But that's a sort of part of Platinum's DNA. Like they really want you to get good at their games, and I really, really like that. Like in Bayonetta, and part of that means like often in like Bayonetta encounters and things like that, you get trophies in that as well for each combat segment. But it will be like most of them that I got on my first playthrough, they were just trash. It's like, you just about made it. You've got the clay trophy. It's meaningless and worth nothing. What that tells you is there are levels to this. There are you can there's more to master here. There's more to do, and there's more to kind of enjoy if you really want to kind of get play the game to its maximum potential. Which is kind of really, I find that really exciting because it's a full length game anyway. Wonderful 101. But if you really want to get obsessed with the system itself, it's like 2 or 3 games in one. I really like it when particularly the way combat systems are built. After playing Final Fantasy 16. which is just there's no depth to it at all in terms of the combat. You can chain lots of things together. It doesn't really matter what you do. You sort of press the buttons and go through the motions for many hours. And actually, like the art of creating a great combat system in lots of different forms and formats. I just absolutely love that about Platinum and any other game designers who create similar things. I kind of like the other game I was playing was Astral Chain, which I talked about in the podcast before, which is actually so this is another Platinum game. It's a police procedural game set in the future where demons are invading meat space, and your character has a sort of police baton and various weapons, and you are an individual combat character, third-person combat. But at the same time as doing these combos, you have a demon on a leash that you control with the right stick. It's an absolutely just a batshit conception of combat. Like, it's just as is wonderful 101. Like, both like the idea that you're creating gestures to turn people into weapons that you then hit things with. In Astral Chain, you're sort of I'm hitting things with my baton, and then I'm also at the same time using the right stick to encircle. Get my demon dog to encircle enemies with the chain leash that freezes them in place. Then I get to mega combo them because they're all frozen, and it's just like I can't believe they made it. I can't believe like it got made because it's such a weird system, unlike anything else I've ever played. In terms of actually the leash is a kind of object that you use. Sometimes there are enemies that charge at you, and you see a projection across the battlefield of where they're going to charge, and then you send you've got your link to your demon by the leash, and then you stretch yourself and the demon to put the leash across the path of the charging demon, and they like in almost like slapstick fashion barge into the chain. They get it goes to its full extension and then bounces them back to the entire other side of the arena, and it's just absolutely bonkers stuff. But then again, like it's rating every combat encounter that you do, and like I've started to get a lot better at it. But then you go online, you're watching people, and it's like, oh my god, there are just levels. Like there are different combos that you can do in terms of you hit some things with the baton, then switch to the heavy thing, while you get your demon to tie people up in their chain, and then you hit them with the big sword for a bit, and then you change to the gun, and then you switch to a different demon and lift them in the air, and then you're shooting them. It's just the amount of depth and kind of complexity and just slapstick entertainments that Platinum build into their combat systems, while also just embracing just completely batshit ideas and just fully releasing a game based on the fact that you can A, turn loads of little minions into a sword, or B, bounce things around with a demon on a chain. I'll play everything that Platinum releases. I think they did Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance and stuff like that as well, which has its own thing where you're cutting enemies apart and tearing their hearts out to get points and stuff. I don't know. I've just really, really enjoyed sort of going through my back catalogue and like rediscovering my love for Platinum stuff.
Are you going to play Vanquish? That's a good one.
Oh, Vanquish is great.
The slidey shooty one.
Yes, I've played it. I've beaten Vanquish before. Hilarious for just the total inclusion of Hillary Clinton as the president of the United States in space as robots are attacking.
It's got one of the stupidest plots.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's so much fun. Vanquish is really interesting because that's a bit of a departure from all the stuff I was just talking about, but it still does. There's a kind of rule of cool to Platinum stuff where you can vault over scenery and you can slide. You can do a sort of like rock star slide across the stage, but you've got jet boots, so you boost yourself along with your jet boots as you sort of sliding crotch out fully, like leaning back, and then whenever you do something like that, the game goes into slow motion and you just get to combo headshot loads of stuff with your ridiculous robot guns, and the bosses is just berserk as well. Really good fun. No, Vanquish is a really good one. It's another one. There's loads of kind of like, I don't know how to get good at Vanquish yet, but it's one I need to go back to and play. But more of that sort of thing, please.
Do you ever play their Transformers game?
I didn't. No, I can't remember what it was called, but yes, I saw that they were involved. Devastation. I didn't actually, but so Platinum seem to have like made a bunch of games that have been palmed off to them from other studios, or they've consulted on games where they've sort of been involved in sort of the combat systems. I think Nier Automata. So 16, yeah, I think so I think you could sort of tell from like the animations and the snappiness. Like to me, like Final Fantasy 16 doesn't have anywhere near the depth of their like core games. But I think they did. They had a hand in Near Automata as well a few years back for the combat, and you could sort of see the kind of snappiness and fantastic sort of swordplay you get to do in those games. Definitely sort of platinum motifs. But no, I didn't play that. I didn't play the Transformers game. I should actually I kind of want to play all their games. Is it any good?
I don't really know, but it's just one of those. They're an interesting studio because they do a bunch of sort of stuff that in the heyday of our games journalism careers would have been absolute poison. Third party tie-ins to big franchises. But from what I understand, that they did a noble effort on it. I was just wondering what your take on it was.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to pick that one up. I didn't realize that they made Mad World on the Wii, which was of hyper-violent black and white. Yeah. I think it's listed here as their first game, actually. I didn't know that was back.
That was a cover on Edge magazine.
Oh, wow, yeah.
One of the many games that we cursed to ignominy by putting it on the cover.
It always felt like Mad World was part of the statement that Nintendo were actually going to host gritty and violent games to an extent. I feel like a few... That was early. Then they quickly did Bayonetta and Vanquish. Metal Gear Rising Revenge is Wonderful 101, Bayonetta 2. Oh, they did a Legend of Korra game. Wow, interesting. Legend of Korra is the Avatar universe.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that there was even a Korra game when apparently they did that. Transformers Devastation, Star Fox Zero. I remember that being a cursed game, actually.
I wish I could enjoy their games more. I've tried a good deal of them and given lots of them a fair go. And I can never push past the lore and the dialogue and the acting and all that sort of stuff. It just starts to do my head in after a certain point, and I can't cope anymore. Like Bayonetta, I am assured by just about everyone I've ever known who plays video games is a classic and a masterpiece. And I just, whatever the layer of irony that that game is sort of coated in, I just can't push through it. And like, I loved DMC, the one done by the British studio. I really enjoyed that one. I played that through and completed it. But like, for some reason, I think that shimmer of irony over that game, which is no less stupid, really, it's just different, I was sort of fine with. But yeah, the Bayonetta sense of humor, I just can't get my head around it.
Yeah, they're all. It is absolutely bonkers. I don't know what to make of it, really. In terms of like, are these stereotypes empowering anyone, or like is this bad? Is what I'm watching kind of bad? And I ended up sort of like being sort of blasted into submission by it, really, and also just
that's an appropriate pose to be in underneath the latex-clad Bayonetta.
Very true. Yeah, so I've really enjoyed those two games, particularly for their strange control schemes, and I'd say like almost ill-advised for the fact that it requires players to learn an entirely new way of sort of interacting with the controller, especially if you use the sort of touch screen controls for the Wonderful 101, which are just almost unmanageable. Just to ask players to learn a whole new way to hold the controller and do stuff is kind of quite an ask. But it has sort of solidified my next game buy, which is going to be Pikmin 4. Not from Platinum Games.
No.
Not about, well, it is about beating up monsters to an extent, but none of the sort of like, goal chasing combat encounters where you're trying to get the highest combo score on this poor, innocent creature who's trying to survive in the middle of, a swamp. But all these games reminded me of like having very complicated control systems where the right stick and gestures are kind of a big part of it. And Pikmin is one of the few games on controller that have actually done a great job of letting you use the right stick as a cursor, summoning minions, having those kind of like RTS controls in a kind of tight tactical context that isn't overwhelming. And it's completely intuitive and also just very, very fun. So when you hold down the button, you put the cursor over a piece of land and you hold down the button and a big whistle goes out and a huge radius blasts out of your cursor and summons all the Pikmin to you. It's an incredibly satisfying, really well observed mechanic in the sense that it communicates exactly what it's doing it sounds great, it looks great, and it's wonderful to see all your little Pikmin dudes dash back towards you and form up around you in a blob. An incredibly, kind of slimmed down but really honed control system from the first game onwards. Actually, I really enjoyed the first one. So I just know that the fourth one's going to be more of that good stuff, because I played the demo as well. There's a free demo, really well worth playing if you've got a Switch. Good stuff.
Lovely. Should we end the podcast there? Let's end the podcast there.
Sounds good.
That's all the podcast we had. We've finished it. We've done it. We've consumed it all.
We've platinum the podcast.
We have.
Absolutely.
If you'd like to send us a question, you can do so at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You could tweet us. Don't bother. All these recordings are uploaded as videos to YouTube, where you can find other nonsense by us. The address for that is youtube.com/crateandcrowbar. And thanks as always to our backers on Patreon. You can back us too at patreon.com/crateandcrowbar, or you can simply join our lovely Discord community, the link for which is on our website, crateandcrowbar.com. That's it. I'm going to caper off into the hills like the goblin that I am. I've been Marsh Davis.
I'm going to follow my dark urge and commit some dreadful faux pas at a forest bacchanal.
I'm going to go full deep gnome and just dig directly downwards and then cover myself up and hibernate.
That sounds lovely.
I could have a bit of that.
Good night.
Goodbye.